Chinese state media lashed out against Japan and Australia this week over their confrontational new defense pact and said the two countries would pay a corresponding price if it threatens China's security. The leaders of Japan and Australia reached a preliminary agreement on a bilateral defense pact on Tuesday, November 17th, according to a statement from Australia's Prime Minister. The deal, dubbed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, bolsters ties between the two U.S. allies amid rising Chinese military assertiveness in the Asia-Pacific region. If ratified, the agreement would allow the countries to train on each other's territory, make it easier for troops from both sides to share military bases, and streamline cooperation during military exercises and disaster missions. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga held in-person talks during which they also agreed to cooperate in tackling climate change. Their meeting follows Sunday's signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which would become the world's largest trade bloc and includes China, Japan, Australia, and 12 other Asia-Pacific countries. For Japan, the deal is the first of its kind since the Status of Forces Agreement with the U.S. was signed in 1960. That agreement allows for some 50,000 American troops to be stationed on bases throughout Japan. In a joint statement, Suga and Morrison expressed serious concerns about the situation in the South and East China Seas and strong opposition to militarizing disputed islands and other unilateral attempts to change the status quo without explicitly mentioning China. The talks coincided with exercises in the Northern Arabia Sea involving the four countries that comprises the Quad: the US, Japan, Australia, and India. The Quad is an informal strategic forum between the four countries that is rapidly solidifying into a formidable anti-Chinese bloc. That naval drill, codenamed Malabar, included India's Vikramaditya naval carrier battle group and U.S. Navy's Nimitz strike group and frontline warships from Australia and Japan. Beijing has described the Quad as an Asian NATO designed to counter China. The group already shows signs of expanding. In March, the Quad Plus countries, India, US, Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Vietnam, held a second round of diplomatic talks focusing on the coronavirus pandemic. China's state-run Global Times said the deal between Japan and Australia provides a new lever for the U.S. to divide Asia, and that Tokyo and Canberra are recklessly taking the first step to conduct deep defense cooperation that targets a third party. The tabloid warned Beijing was unlikely to remain indifferent to U.S. moves aimed at inciting countries to gang up against China in the long run. It added they will surely pay a corresponding price if China's national interests are infringed upon and its security is threatened. That's what China's Global Times wrote, even as it shows a headline and photo that appear to downplay the significance of the meeting between Australia and Japan's leaders. Compare that to how the meeting was framed by the Australian and by Reuters. Hat tip to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's China correspondent Bill Birtles for posting these on Twitter. If you missed our coverage of the landmark trade deal China just signed with Japan, Australia, and 12 other countries, that's coming up next. China has signed the world's largest trade deal, one that excludes the U.S., with 14 other economies in the Asia-Pacific region. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, is made up of China, the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. India was given the chance to join but opted out in 2019. Members of the new free trade bloc cover a market of 2.2 billion people and $26.2 trillion of global output. That's nearly a third of the world's population and 29% of global gross domestic product. That makes RCEP larger than the economies of the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement and the European Union. The RCEP is seen as an economic and diplomatic victory for China. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, a proposed trade agreement that included the U.S. and several Asia-Pacific countries but which excluded China, was negotiated by the Obama administration. When Donald Trump became president in 2017, he withdrew the U.S. from the trade pact. The RCEP includes countries that have security relationships with Washington and strained diplomatic relations with Beijing, most notably Japan and Australia. The diplomatic messaging of RCEP may be just as important as the economies. A coup for China, analysts from Citi Research wrote in a Sunday report quoted by CNBC. Quoted by the BBC, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said the signing of the RCEP brings a ray of light and hope amid the clouds, given the current global circumstances. Li described the agreement as a victory of multilateralism and free trade.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.